What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So yes, I'm back in Sydney, still in Australia for the next couple of days. I think I'm going back to Canada like maybe Tuesday or something. I forgot because it's like a 40 hour journey. It's gonna take a hot minute. Anyways, in this video, I really wanted to discuss the fire decks and how to beat them, especially, and also how to understand how they function and how they differ from one another, because there are a lot of variants and I feel like there are more important ones than people actually believe. It's not just Fire King and Pure Snake, guys. But yeah, anyways, before we move any further, I'd really appreciate if you could smash the like and subscribe button. Thank you so much, you are the best. And now let's get right into it. Alright, so first things first, they have like what, they can go upwards of like 15 one-card combos in a 40-card deck, meaning that it isn't difficult for them to have like a 92% likelihood of having their one-card starter. And if that one-card combo leads to an FTK, for example, in the case of Infernoid, where they can, I showcased this in one video, but you can go into like the Ultimatal Bishbalkin and then give it control to the opponent with the Geonator Transverser, and it has 8,000 attacks, so then you just make the rank 4 Chronomaly Machu back or something. You target it and then your opponent takes 8k because the original attack is 0 and the actual current attack is 8k, so your opponent takes the difference in damage. It's a one-card FTK, really simple to do, and there are a lot of ways to do it, and not a lot of ways to stop it, which is what makes the Inferno FTK really scary. And there's also the Rescue Ace deck, as well as obviously Pure and Fire King. Now the thing is, even when they can't make the full combo, which usually would happen with Snake Eye Ash or Bonfire, or in certain cases even with Wanted or Diabell Star, even though these cards are less good, they can still lead to like almost full combo in Fire King. You're really just missing out on one monster. So for example, Snake Eye Ash and Bonfire, you can end on Appaloosa, Amblowill, and Arvata. But with Diabell Star and Wanted, you're ending on Appaloosa, Amblowill. So you're not ending on Arvata, but it doesn't matter because you can summon the Arvata on the opponent's turn using the Garunic, so it's all good in the hood. 1-for-1 is kind of like the cheat card, and Populous is the Garnet that isn't a Garnet, because if you draw it, it's still 3 interruptions, so Flamberge into IP, into SP with a Princess in the graveyard, so it's pretty nice. And then of course the Pure deck can make negates in the form of Burlo Savage and Ballon. The Fire King deck is the most explosive one. The Inferno deck is the one that you cannot beat with Board Breakers, which is the reason why hand traps are kind of a necessity. And Rescue Ace, it doesn't lose to that many hand traps. Like, it can easily play through Joel, because, you know, at the end of the day, the only search that you really need is the Search of Turbulence, and then you can set 4 cards, and then you kind of just win there. And it's also a fire deck that can play through Shifter in a way. Granted that you have Airlifter or Emergency access, otherwise it's kind of going to be a little hard. Alright, so here I made a list of 10 hand traps, the 10 best hand traps to play, I want to say. The 3 worst would definitely have to be Drool, DD Crow, and Ghostbell. I keep mentioning about how garbage these cards are. People will always disagree. People will always say that these cards are good against the fire decks. But my issue is that if you're justifying these cards being good, then you're basically saying that these cards are completely cracked, because you're always going to be playing these cards before. And are you realistically playing 18 to 21 hand traps in your deck? I don't think so, right? Because these cards, again, they don't serve as much as a purpose. If you only draw Ghostbell as your one and only hand trap, it doesn't matter that you can negate Flamberge, for example. It's not going to do anything because it's not enough to stop their entire combo. They can still make a lot of interruptions through that one Ghostbell. DD Crow, same thing. If you're using DD Crow as a board breaker, so that you're holding it on your own turn to stop the Princess or the Garunics, then you might as well just play board breakers at this point, because it's just too weak of an effect for a hand trap. It could have been like a turn-skipping card such as Valor Imperm on its Snake Eye Ash, and that's just insane. So you might as well rely on these kind of cards. Even Mourner can be a turn-skipper if at least used on Diabell Star, or if used on the Oak if your opponent starts with Snake Eye Ash, but then if he searched Original, then you're kind of screwed. If he searched Divine Temple, it's a different story. It can actually work in your favor. The funny thing is, people used to like talk trash on Ash and say that it's really bad, and that it's not going to see play this format because Hita can revive it back. I made a video a while back saying that all these arguments are copium, because Ash, it's the kind of hand trap that if you're committing to playing hand traps, there is no way you can play without Ash. It is simply the most generic one. It's like the best out of its applications, right? Not necessarily because of its power. I think Nibiru is the best one in terms of power level. Ash is just like that kind of hand trap that will never be bad. It doesn't really have any bad matchups per se. You could be against any kind of rogue deck and it's always going to do something. And the fact that it loses to Hita is a completely irrelevant argument, because even if they get to revive back your Ash, what are they gonna do? Like Princess and then Emblo Whale Pass. You don't really care that much about that. It's not the end of the world. The only drawback for playing the card, but it's not even that huge. So it's alright if your Ash loses to Hita every now and then, if the pros completely outweigh the cons. But for these cards, again, Joel, I mean, they're always going to be doing the exact same part. I'm kind of getting tired of explaining it. Joel is just a bad card. It's only good if your opponent's one and only play is activate Bonfire, search Snake Eye Ash. That's it. If your opponent does literally anything else, your Joel is basically going to be you hand looping yourself, and you might also draw multiple Joels, which is bad. And again, also kind of a little tired of explaining DD Crow and Ghost Bell. People will always disagree with me, I already understand. But again, just know that if you're playing these cards, you're playing upwards of 18 to 21 hand traps, which I will never agree with. Unless you're playing Tenpai Dragon, but even then, you might as well just play other hand traps even. Like, the Tenpai Dragon can also play, like, Shifter, multiple Bestials, and stuff like that. These cards are just absolute dog shit. Now, the Bestials are actually really interesting because they're only really good against the pure build, because they interact a lot with dark monsters in the graveyard. So either Borreload Savage trying to target the Linkuriboh so that they can get the Boral counter. The Bestial will basically be able to force out that Linkuriboh graveyard effect, because they don't want you to summon that Bestial monster, which is fine with you because at least the Borreload Savage will not be getting a negate. But then they can still keep playing because they can link off the Savage, do a different board. It's fine because they're going to be making less interruptions. You're still going to keep that Bestial, so you're not going neg 1, you're going neg 0, and then you can use the Bestial again on the opponent's turn. So that's what I really like about Bestials. They're really just free. You never lose anything, and your opponent always loses something. And then, yeah, Veiler, Imperm pretty much in the same boat, but Imperm being a little better because you can draw it for turn and have, you know, usages for this card. And it doesn't lose to Triple Tactic Talon called by the Grave. The one issue, though, I realized if you draw multiple Imperms and your opponent has Crossout Designator, you can't go Imperm from the hand. So it loses really hard to one Crossout, whereas Veiler, you can chain the second Veiler to Crossout. So I guess this is the one advantage, and also Veiler being a spellcaster for Celine. Not that it super matters, but it might matter every now and then. And then, yeah, we've got Nibiru, which is just like the most powerful hand trap on its own. It does a lot. But obviously every single one of these fire decks can somewhat play through it. Inferno, you can protect yourself from the FTK completely if you hold it when they summon Bish Balkan, because there's realistically just no way they can summon it back. Or actually, you can wait until the very end. They summon everything, like Machu Mech, all that stuff, and then you just nib, and then they kind of just die. And then we also have Ghost Mourner. It's your substitute for a timed card, as well as extra copies of Veiler and Imperm. I also made a video on that. And finally, Phantasmate to draw into preferably board breakers. I already mentioned in the past how much I didn't like Phantasmate to hand traps, especially if you're going Phantasmate draw into Imperm or Droll. These cards would basically have no value, because by the time you get to draw Droll, your opponent already committed to a lot of searches, because summoning Link monsters very often happens very late. Linkuriboh isn't that real. Sometimes people are going to be making their first Link monster like way later than that. And then we also have ways of beating the Fire decks using board breakers. So in order to beat Fire King, there are a lot of them that can destroy that deck. So obviously Cosmic Cyclone on the Fire King Island hurts. It kind of acts as a Regeki, but it's also a collateral damage in case your opponent sides in like Summon Limit Anti-Spell. So Cosmic is just like a really safe card. Typhoon is a really good one that has been played in Chansey's team, and they actually said that it was pretty good for them, so shoutouts to them. It's just another safe card that you can use on your opponent's end phase. Chansey explained that in one of his videos, but in case your opponent has a Flamberge and Divine Temple, Cosmic Cyclone doesn't really deal that well with them, well, with the IP Masquerena, but Typhoon does, because it's your opponent's turn, so he can't use the Flamberge to revive back. Soul Release, particularly good against Fire King, less good against Pure Snake Eyes. First of all, because they have Omni Negates, and second of all, because they don't really have Fire King cards to banish. They only have Pure Snake Eye cards. You can banish the Oak, and that really kills their grind game. Even the Pure Snake Eyes deck could lose out to Soul Release, but I would not necessarily gamble everything on this card. Duster, evenly, these cards are not really good against Fire King and Pure Snake Eyes, because, I mean, if you use Duster on Island where there's Sanctuary, the Sanctuary is going to take the fall instead, but the Island is going to survive, granted they have a Fire Monster in the hand or field to destroy. Evenly, not too bad, but all they really need is one Fire Monster, and then they can trigger all the graveyard effects. So that's the reason I'm just not that much of a fan of Evenly, honestly. Shuttle Fusion, this card is really broken. If you can summon like Abcalone, yeah, you can send the Ariel and then banish 3 cards from, up to 3 cards from either graveyard. It's pretty much like a baby Soul Release, so that's what I really like a lot about this card. My issue with Shuttle Fusion is, well, first of all, it can get ashed, but that's not really real. It can get naturally played around if your opponent goes into the Zealantis turn 1 and then banishes everything and then resummons everything back. The monsters are not deemed to be special summoned from the extra deck because they are banished and then they are re-special summoned back. It's not like SP where they get banished and then just return back. So keep that into consideration. Foolish Return, a board breaker that I've seen a little bit but not that much. It's kind of like a DD Crow, but it's not a monster. I think it's better than DD Crow, actually. And it's much better against Despia because if they have the Trap Brigade Mercourier, they can negate your DD Crow and Bestials in case you like draw them for turn or something, but the Foolish Return, it's always gonna resolve. I actually like this card if you just want like a really safe approach. Basically, target one card in your opponent's graveyard, shuffle it back into the deck. It doesn't banish, so it's also safe from like Artifact Lancia. Not really that it matters. And then we also have, you know, Call by the Grave. I mean, that it's a one-off, so it's not really like there's that much to talk about, but it's very similar to Foolish Return, but it does banish, and it does negate stuff, and it's really good against hand traps. Monster Reborn, it's kind of like a board breaker, actually, but not super great. Like, you're gonna be reviving back your opponent's Princess or Garunix in order to make him lose that card, but then what are you gonna do, right? You're just gonna keep the Princess on the field forever? You're just gonna go Garunix, send Ponix? There's nothing to do with those cards, so that's my issue. Monster Reborn on its own doesn't really do much of anything. Triple Tactic Talents, you're gonna have to wait until your opponent commits to like an action, but once he does, this card is devastating, as well as every other monster stealing cards. Change of Heart, Mind Control, Enemy Controller. Enemy Controller being the flexible one because you can chain it to like an Imperm or Veiler. That's what I really like. You can trade like 2 for 1. And then Mind Control, I mean, it's a worse version of Change of Heart, but it is a 3, so if you want to play Mind Control, then you're probably maxing out on these other cards at first. And then finally is a really interesting card, so Super Polymerization. The thing is, I don't really like Super Polymerization as a board breaker itself, but what I really like about this card is the monster that you're summoning off of it, which is Mud Dragon of the Swamp. This card basically just kills every fire deck except Inferno, obviously, because they FTK you. But Rescue Ace, all their trap cards, they will target. So if you summon a Mud Dragon, you could just call Fire, and then they can't even Princess, because they would have to target their own Fire monster. A single Mud Dragon shuts down basically every single one of their interruption, except against the Fire King deck, where they can still go Garunix, destroy the Kirin, and then revive back a Fire King monster, and then destroy a card on the field without targeting. That would lose out very hard. Instant Fusion and Super Poly are not necessarily always your win condition against those decks, but they do get you really far if you want to go for the board breaker approach, which is a viable option in the Despia deck, because Instant Fusion can also summon Millenniumize Restrict and protect you from Ash on your branded fusion, so I do like it, honestly. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for this video. I guess there's no reason to really, like, dwell on, like, these cards even further. It's not like there's any other, like, secret options or secret tech cards that are being, like, gate-kept by the pro players. All the information is up there for you guys. Yeah, the way people are beating Fire King, honestly, and the Fire decks in general, for the most part, is by playing billions of hand traps, because hand traps are also going to carry you for those FTK or weird matchups or board breakers. My issue with them is that when you draw them, you always have to draw 2 board breakers that are different with one another. Like, for example, if I draw Cosmic Cyclone alone, it's not enough. But if I draw Cosmic and Soul Release, it's game, because Soul Release makes my opponent lose everything from the grave, and then Cosmic Cyclone makes my opponent lose everything from the field. Granted, I banished that Fire King Island. Basically, you only have cards in the hand that's not that intimidating. Like, Fire King High Avatar Kirin wouldn't really threaten me at this point. These 2 cards work really well with each other, but at the same time, hand traps work really well with each other. Like, you could draw, like, Ash Veiler, or, like, double Veiler, double Imperm, Nibiru plus any hand trap, Mourner plus any of these hand traps, Phantasma into like another hand trap while we already had another hand trap, Bestial with like 1 hand trap against Pure, it would be insane. So I think hand traps are just like the safer approach, but board breakers can be really good in case you're playing a deck like Despia, for example, which is really centered around having a lot of gas and having like a natural way to break boards without having to rely on hand traps. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts about, all these hand traps and board breakers in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.